He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Huntly, a town steeped in history, home to Glenronach Distillery and Huntly Castle. Hundreds of years ago, it gave shelter to Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce? Isn't he that fella from Braveheart? Oh, hang on. Wrong Huntly. Okay, take two. Huntly, a well-known thoroughfare heading north to Auckland or Hamilton, and a former coal mining town. It's home to Taniwharo rugby team, decent bakeries, and even the Top Twins. And yes, it's famous for that old last remaining Decca sign. This Huntly originated from the other Huntly in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. A guy called James Henry loved his hometown so much, the one in Scotland that is, that he decided to name the one in Aotearoa after it. And from 1877, well, it stuck. But before Henry's time as postmaster, this town had another name, and it has to do with a local chief by the name of Te Putu, who was none other than the great-great-grandfather of Pōtatau Te Whirowhiro, the first Māori king. Back in the 1700s, Te Putu wanted to preserve a precious local food source. This is Cheryl Matinga of Ngāti Mahuta and chair of the Huntly Community Board.
The story goes that in a time where our tuna source was depleting, our fishing whānau were overfishing our tuna, and what Te Putu done was he put a pou into the ground. It was called a pou rāhui. He grabbed a pōkeka feather from his cloak, and he tied it to the end of that pou, and the pou signified rāhui.
So, to break that down, a rāhui is a restricted area and a pōkeka is a cloak or a cape. In this case, Te Putu plucked a feather from his pōkeka and tied it around a pou. Try and say that 10 times. Now, a pou is a stake. Now, he drove this into the ground, kind of like a no-go signpost. So let's get into the story. This is Know My Town. I'm Justine Murray, and this week we're in North Waikato, Huntly, or as it was originally called, Rāhui Pōkeka. Know My Town is a series about Māori place names, and along the way we highlight a few things about the community, the local industry, stories about monuments. You might have heard our podcast about the Wairaka statue in Whakatane. But this one is a little different. You see, for a few years, Huntly has been, well, media fodder.
I hear that you guys are about to announce the prize for New Zealand's worst town.
It's Huntly! The New Zealand Facebook page have just voted Huntly the worst town in New Zealand for the second year in a row.
Geez, that's pretty harsh. But the locals aren't having a bar of that. This is Joanne and her friend who I bumped into outside one of the popular kai spots.
Oh, that's outsiders, eh, mate?
Yeah,
that's outsiders. Hey, people that don't know the people here, and they judge the book by its cover. Nothing wrong with Rāhui Pōkeka. Yeah. It's a beautiful place. It's got beautiful people. They got some beautiful business. People's like the people from the bakery.
Huntly Golden Bakery and Cafe.
Yeah. I come all the way here for their potato top pies.
Yes, and good club sandwiches too, I must say. And it's a bit of a tangent, but these locals aren't just protective of Huntly. They've got things to say about, well, other places in the district as well.
Yeah. Raglan was a useless army fella that they named Raglan after. Hey, when we call it Whaingaroa, I'd rather call it Whaingaroa.
So Raglan takes its name from Fitzroy Somerset, First Lord Baron Raglan, who was a commander during the Crimean War in 1853. The Māori name is Whaingaroa, which means the long pursuit, named after the long journey of the Tainui Waka. But back to the ladies outside the bakery. Joanne lives up the road in Taupiri, a few k's away. They like the name Rāhui Pōkeka.
Like I'd rather call Rāhui Pōkeka, because Huntly's most probably some foolish army, lack of strategic thinking acumen. Hey, and they named them these sorts of places after those failures from the British times.
Okay, so it's actually named after the ancestral seat of the Gordon clan back in Scotland. But as I mentioned, Huntly was named thanks to Postmaster James Henry. Here's Cheryl Matzinga again.
So the Huntly story was there was a postman. His whānau lived in Huntly overseas, and so he was posting letters back, and then so the name was just adopted that way.
Yeah.
Nothing deep, nothing meaningful.
The Māori name, though, has a bit more to it.
At the time, Rāhui Pōkeka was known for its tuna settlement. We had 3 different types of tuna flowing through our lakes.
But due to overfishing, Te Putu declared the Rāhui, driving his stake into the ground.
And what they did was he hammered it. So the story differs around in Rāhui Pōkeka, but at the marae, it said maybe daily or even weekly or monthly. However often he hammered this po into the ground, that Rāhui stood in place. So until that po, that feather was under the dirt, that's when the Rāhui would be lifted.
So, once the po was hammered all the way into the ground, the Rāhui was over.
And once the Rāhui was lifted, he gathered all of the tuna catching whānau. And what he did is he sent them out to go and catch tuna and bring them and lay them out in front of him. And that way he would divide it equally amongst the community. And that process there was called wāwahitanga, which is where Wāhi Pā gets its name. Wāwahitia i ngā tuna.
So when an area goes from restricted, that's when the Rāhui is present, to unrestricted, this process is called whakanoa.
They did a haka to whakanoa, which is why one of the lakes on the other side of Rāhui Pōkeka, on the east side, is called Hakanoa.
So a few names stem from this one incident. But for Cheryl, the focus is on Huntly and reclaiming its old name.
So everywhere around Rāhui Pōkeka, around Huntly, are all Māori names. We've got Taupiri, we got Horotu, we got Garua Wāhia, Pōkeno, Te Kauwhata, Ruawaro, Rotowaro. We've got all of these names, and then you've got Huntly in the middle of all of them.
Huntly sticks out like a sore thumb, where you know the name.
Absolutely.
In terms of Eden Wawatai family has lived in Huntly for about 5 generations. While her iwi affiliations are to Ngāti Porou and Ngāti Kahungunu, Huntly is home. Eden says a move for a name change is very much on the radar.
About 3 or 4 years ago, when we were all standing for community board, we were asked the question by local Māori if we support the name change and also why haven't we gone down that track. We definitely all committed at that time that would be one of our priorities, at least recognising that societal change and acceptance needs to happen first. Any opportunity we can, we try to use Rāhui Pōkeka. The local train station was going through a naming process, and when it got to council, it became about, okay, so is it Rāhui Pōkeka - Huntly or the other way around? They put it to our community board of what would our preference be, and we chose Rāhui Pōkeka - Huntly, and then it went to full council and was voted in by a majority.
So a win there, and Eden's even put her efforts into what the visitors see on the way into Huntly.
But even I don't know if you saw on your way in, I ran the welcome sign into Huntly.
I saw it, the Rāhui Pōkeka's first.
Yes, so I ran a competition in my last term for the welcome sign design, and part of that had to have, I didn't push for it to be first, but it had to have Rāhui Pōkeka in it.
From the few hours I spent in Huntly, Rāhui Pōkeka, and my chats with a few locals and business owners, I think the bad rap Huntly gets does annoy some. Clive Kassouf is the manager of the clothing store Les Kassouf and Sons, and he was a bit wary of talking to me. He's just over the negativity in the media, and fair enough. I get it. His family goes back a few generations.
The first shop was built around about 1905, 1906. There was a fire in town and it got burnt down, and then we built this one here, which is 1926, and it's been here ever since. So we've been here over 100 years, third generation. I've been here for over 50 years serving people, and what pleases me the most in this business is the support from the locals, and I'm serving people like the parents used to bring their kids in. I'm serving their kids, and that's just fantastic. There's some families here which have been shopping here for over a century, and they come and have a yarn, and they can remember when Dad used to be here, or even Granddad, so it's quite cool. I don't mind the name, Pōkeka. How does it pronounce?
Rāhui Pōkeka.
I think that's a step in the right direction.
And as for that landmark Decca sign from the 1990s department store, I'm standing beside the Decca sign that's somehow become a local icon, a landmark of Rāhui Pōkeka Huntly. I don't know why, but it's kind of this iconic sign. I remember Decca back in the 90s, actually late 80s. I think it looks about, 12 metres high. And fun fact, the Decca sign has its own Twitter account with 412 followers. I think that's more than me. But hey, the people of Huntly are more focused on its future than its past, or at least using the past to inspire the future. Here's Cheryl Matinga.
What I do think is that not enough people know about the story. And so I think a lot of the deprivation rates in Huntly come because of that. So Huntly there's no solid foundation to it. It's built on sand, all of that. But in Rāhui Pōkeka, all of the elements that acknowledge Rāhui Pōkeka to be our name are spaces that are thriving within the community. It's more than just a name. It's like a kid. You won't just name your kid anything. You name them something meaningful.
Rāhui Pōkeka, the Māori name for the town Huntly, based on the story of the chief Te Putu, concerned about the dwindling fish and eels in the rivers. He placed a rāhui in the area, and Pōkeka, named after a feather he placed around his po. Today, Huntly has a population of just over 10,000 according to the 2018 census. Ko Ngāti Mahuta te mana whenua. Tēnā tātou katoa. Thanks for listening to Know My Town with me, Justine Murray. Executive producer Tim Watkin, engineer William Saunders. Follow Know My Town, that's Naumai Town, on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.